Okay, welcome back. This is Dr. Matthew J. Trom from Engineer Inc. This is the second video in a series of videos I'm putting together to show you how to assemble the PASCO stress strain apparatus, part number AP-8214A. We've completed the initial assembly of the rotary to linear actuator. This rubber band connects to the rotary motion sensor. So we're now going to install the rotary motion sensor and show you how to do that, and then move on to the lever arm component. So here is the rotary motion sensor. And the way that this works, you can see the wire coming off of here. That wire ultimately connects into the PASCO data acquisition system with this wire here. And essentially all that it's doing is it's just monitoring the number of times this wheel runs around and indicating the number of times that the wheel runs around, knowing the ratio between the diameter of this wheel and the diameter of this wheel on the rotary to linear actuator. It backs out how far this component has moved, and that gives you the strain on the sample. So there's some complicated verbiage in the manual about how to correctly install this guy, and really I think it's just common sense. We want to install it in such a way that the band here can fit over the rotor here. So that's one thing that we're going to look for. And then the other thing that we want to look for is that the holes on the bottom line up with the holes in the base right there. And we want to make sure that the wire sticks out in a way that it's not somehow being interfered with some other component on the apparatus. So, obviously I don't want to install it like this, and I don't want to install it like this because there's no holes, and I don't want to install it like this because the wire interferes. So if you just think about it for a little while, you end up with that being the correct orientation. Now there are two knurled machine screws that look like that. They have little nuts on them, and the nuts are there just to make sure that you don't drive those screws too far into the base of the apparatus. And because they're knurled, they can just be installed by hand. There's no need for a hex screw or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this guy 90 degrees and put him in the frame of view, and I'm going to just push these machine screws through until they line up with the holes on the sensor. So there's one, there's two, and I'm just going to make sure that they're finger tight. Good. Okay, and then I'm going to set this guy back down, and remember that this rubber band has to connect between the actuator here and the sensor here. So I'm just going to run this guy over like so. Okay, perfect. So now if I rotate the actuator, notice that the force sensor, sorry, not the force sensor, the displacement sensor, the rotary sensor, also moves. And that is the behavior that I'm looking for. Okay, so we've got that set up. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to install the lever. This lever gets installed here around this pin. The lever looks like this. PASCO says that it's a 5-to-1 lever, and essentially all that it's doing is just converting a force, essentially multiplying a force by 5 times and reducing the displacement by 5 times in the process, so that the force sensor, which we'll ultimately install here, essentially can read a force that's 5 times larger than is actually imposed. So that's essentially what it's doing. Now, your device may come with this lever installed, but I've uninstalled it just in case you encounter the system with the lever uninstalled, to give you a sense then of how to install it. So I've got 2 of those larger machine screws, and those larger machine screws again require a hex head, which is a 13/16 hex head. There it is. And I've got 2 holes for the lever here, and I've got 2 holes on the bottom that are threaded there. And I want to make sure ultimately when the lever is installed that it knocks up against this pin as the stop. So with all that information, I'm going to turn this guy on its side again. I'm going to push these machine screws through the holes, and I'm going to line them up with the threaded holes on the lever. There's one. Whoops. So I will just, at least initially, tighten by hand. Here's 2. Again, just initially tighten by hand to get everything lined up. Okay, and then I'm going to follow with my screwdriver and my hex to get everything tightened down. Until it's rigid. So there's 1. There's 2. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that this first one is tight now that I've tightened down the second one. Yep, it is. Excellent. Okay, we'll get this out of the way and put this back down on its base so that you can see the operation of the lever. So again, it's a 5-to-1 lever. I'm going to now, in a future step, put the sample between these 2 screw brackets, and this lever, which PASCO says is a 5-to-1 lever, is going to come to rest against this pin to stop it from overextending. And when I put the sample here, I'm going to actually pull the sample in this direction, and this lever is going to push against a force sensor, and we'll measure the force here, again magnified by 5 times over what's experienced here, so that it can be measured. Okay, so now we're at this stage in the assembly process, and I'm right up against my 8-minute limit for this video, so I will stop, pause, let you guys take a break, catch up with your assembly, and come back and see me for the next step, which is the force sensor. See you in a moment. Thanks.